Hey, the name's Cruel. That's King Rob Rule. This week I'll be doing my review and impressions on Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. Keep in mind, I've only played about 30 hours of the game, and as most avid hunters will know, that's basically nothing in a Monster Hunter game. But I still think it gives me enough to get a general feel of the game and how it compares to the others, and I'll be giving my recommendation based on that. I'll include timestamps in the description, so if there are parts that you're not interested in and you're looking for something specifically, you can just skip ahead to those points. Okay, so Monster Hunter Freedom Unite is an old as heck game. So is it still worth playing today? I'll give you all the knowledge I have about the game so far to help you determine that answer. However, since the game is so old, it might be tricky for you to get your hands on. If you can manage to get your hands on a PSP, Freedom Unite is a relatively inexpensive game to pick up. But if you have a PlayStation Vita, or you can find one at a decent price, it can be bought very cheaply on the PlayStation Store digitally. Also keep in mind that you can do this on the PSP as well. Personally, I prefer to play on the Vita, as I find it a bit more comfortable and I don't have to listen to that loud UMD spinning in the load screens. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about the actual game. The game starts out with a cutscene on top of a snowy peak in a blizzard. A score of mangled popo are shown at the scene when all of a sudden an onlooker, that's you, is attacked by a tigrex and thrown off the cliff. You are rescued by an ex-hunter who lends you some equipment and introduces you to Pokke Village. This is the hub, so to speak, where you'll spend all your time between quests. From this point to where I'm up to in the game, there isn't much story to speak of, at least from what I've played so far. But Monster Hunter has never been about the story, it's about the hunt. And funnily enough, going back to this much older game, I felt like more of a hunter than in any of the newer games, but I'll talk more about that later. So here's a quick tour of Pokke Village. You have your house, which has your equipment / item box where you can manage your gear and items, as well as a bed you can save at. You'll find a few quality of life improvements are not present in the item box in this game. The quality of life losses do not stop there, let me tell you. You can't save equipment sets, you can't save item loadouts, and there isn't even a combination menu for crafting new items. Thankfully, if you have the required book of combos, when you select your first item to combine, the items that cannot be combined with it will be greyed out. So at least that's something. A feature that also took me a little while to figure out was the room behind your bedroom, where you take care of your palicos and eat meals before quests. For the first few hours of the game, I assumed either eating wasn't in this game, or I hadn't unlocked it yet. But no, instead of being a central part of the village, it's hidden behind your bedroom. This is quite an inconvenience due to the fact that you have to go through 2 loading screens between the quest giver and the room where you eat, which can be quite frustrating, but it is what it is. Also, meals aren't predetermined or saved. You're going to have to either write down the ingredient combinations that work well, look them up online, or just have a superb memory to keep up with all the ingredient effects and combinations. During my playthrough of the game, I wasn't aware of all the ingredient effects. I just tended to make the combinations that sounded good in my head and hope for the best. However, since then I've learned that certain food groups do have certain effects, and you'll have to look them up to learn about them or just learn through trial and error. Do keep in mind though, it's possible to have negative food effects if you're not careful. When recording footage for the video, I was trying to demonstrate some of these negative food effects, as that's something I experienced when I was playing early on, but I just couldn't get it to work no matter how many times I tried, so I'm not sure if it's something like the more experience you have with the kitchen, like the less likely you are to get a negative effect, but you know, that's just sort of what happened when I was recording. Outside of your room, there is a farm where you do all your passive item gathering between quests. As you earn more points, you can upgrade the farm, leading to more valuable materials and gathering points. At the farm, you can gather mushrooms, mine ore, harvest bugs, plant crops and go fishing. There's also a cat that will go out on expeditions for you for a fee. The more points you spend, the more likely it will come back with rare items. Visiting this farm between quests is pretty much essential, due to how tedious it can be gathering items in this game. Speaking of which, materials, as well as money, are quite scarce in this game, so you'll be spending a lot more time gathering and grinding quests for money than you would in the newer Monster Hunter games. Not everyone is going to like that, but personally I can look past it, as it makes you really think about how to spend your time each session, rather than mindlessly racing through the content. Going back to Pokke Village, you'll have your armory and smithy as usual, but you'll notice a few things are different. Only 10 weapons are present, 11 if you count the light bowgun and heavy bowgun separate, which the game doesn't, and certain weapons are grouped together instead of being given their own category. In this game I'm playing as a longsword main, so my weapons are grouped together with the greatsword. I remember this one time where I saw stats for a weapon that I just absolutely loved, like it was way better than the last sword I had, and I grinded for ages to get it, and then when I was really close I looked back and it turns out it was for a greatsword, and I was like, oh well, I just wasted a bunch of time there. So that's something to keep in mind when you're looking back at the weapons, so your main weapon may be grouped together with another one, so just keep that in mind. Just like all Monster Hunter games before World, Gunners and Blade Masters have completely different armor sets, so watch out for that too. Of course there is the armory as well, but most of the gear here is pretty low tier, so there's not much point in using this at all. You also have your standard market, which is nothing special, pretty standard for Monster Hunter. You will see that you can purchase info books from the market as well, not that you really need it. The monster info just provides context if anything, rather than any actual tips or strategy for defeating a monster, so best just to ignore that. There's a secondary market just outside the gathering hall as well that sells crafting materials and other useful items. It's a good place to check out if you can't be bothered doing that one more gathering quest for a particular item, or picking up something to give you an edge on the next hunt. You have the option of going to this training area at the start of the game, but in reality it really isn't training at all. It's simply small monster slaying from what I've tried, so don't waste your time with it. You'll have plenty of that to do in the opening quests. Next is the Gathering Hall, where you can play with other hunters. There is no online play with Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, but you can play with a friend locally. So I would recommend having a friend to play this with if you wanted to experience the multiplayer, as you won't be able to play with anyone online. The Gathering Hall has a quest counter for each rank, a market, item box, these treasure hunter quests. I haven't dabbled in those yet, but they exist. But something I can't forgive this hub for is the lack of a place to eat meals. When playing with a friend, if you want to eat a meal before your hunt, you need to leave the Gathering Hall. Go to your home, go to the back room to eat, and then come back. That's 6 loading screens. Not cool. I'm not sure if I'm missing something or if it gets unlocked later, but I just can't understand why you can't eat in the hub. What's worse is they give you a table to sit at that serves no purpose. It looks like you can eat there, but you can't. It's so frustrating. Finally, the Elder of the Village is where you take on your quests. Like most Monster Hunter games, the first set of quests are a little mundane, but I did find it useful to get a feel for the game and learn how to interact with this stripped down world. And with that, I'll start describing some of the gameplay while on the hunt. Earlier, I mentioned this game made me feel like more of a hunter than any of the later games in the series, and that's for more reasons than one. The first reason is the added importance of being prepared. Sure, in Generations you had to make sure you ate before your missions and had an item loadout ready to go. That's no different here. But in this game, you have a very limited amount of space for carrying items. You only have 3 pages, and you don't get an extra field pouch for gathering items. So you really need to make every single item that you bring on the hunt count. Fill your inventory space carelessly and you might not be able to carve the monster at the end of your hunt. A lot of consideration will be put into what you bring with you to every quest. If you don't need cool drinks or hot drinks, don't bring them. If you don't need paintballs, don't bring them. If you don't need traps, don't bring them. This is going to be a huge adjustment if you're coming from World of Generations, where you can bring loads of items with you to every hunt. So many, in fact, that you can create loadouts for almost any hunt and be covered without worrying about not having enough space. Not here. But this is what I mean about feeling like a hunter. You are really forced to only bring what is necessary and specific to each hunt, and you have to be careful. While inconvenient, it is also extremely immersive in my opinion. Another reason this game makes me feel more like a hunter than later games is the gathering. There is no prompt whenever you are at a gathering point, so when starting out you may find yourself mashing circle all over the map until you eventually find a spot you can gather from. This is made even more difficult by the fact that not all gathering points are clear. Honey and mushrooms are often easily identified. However, some gathering points are so blended into the background that you would never guess they were there. Take bone piles for example. Some gathering points for bone piles look almost identical to the rest of the floor around you. This I am not a fan of. However, about 80% of gathering points have some kind of subtlety to them, which you can identify with experience. This makes learning them extremely rewarding. Again, this makes you feel like a hunter. Like you're learning about the world and environments through experience, rather than simply being presented with the answer from the start. It takes a lot of patience, but it does pay off if you're up for it. Here are some tips for gathering if you're just starting. Mining points are often marked with a cross or a crack in the wall. If you're unsure, quit the pickaxe and walk up to the wall. If you can mine it, the pickaxe will no longer be crossed out and you'll be free to mine. When you're specifically looking for bugs, I recommend keeping the bug net out at all times, because the bugs on the map can blend into the environment, or the area that seems like you can harvest bugs from is actually slightly off. Just keep the bug net equipped, run around the area, and when you can harvest, the bug net will no longer be crossed out. When gathering materials, instead of pressing A to gather each item individually, crouch down and mash the circle button. You won't keep getting up, and you'll continue to harvest until the point is depleted. Finally, and this seems a bit silly, but just run around and mash circle. You'll be bound to find a gathering point in a spot that wasn't completely obvious, and you'll learn from it. Like I said, it's not ideal, but it's rewarding to learn from experience. When it comes to fighting monsters in this game, it can be frustrating to say the least. The number one thing you're going to have to get used to are the bizarre camera controls, which are mapped to the D-pad, requiring you to use what is described as a crab claw grip to control the camera. Personally, I find this way too uncomfortable, so I try my best to use the camera repositioning button, which is mapped to a shoulder button, and save the D-pad for micro adjustments when absolutely necessary. To do this, I just face where I want to look and press the shoulder button to reposition the camera behind me. It's become muscle memory at this point, so it's doable, just not ideal. I've heard it is possible to map the D buttons to the right stick on the Vita, but this still won't make the camera adjustments like a traditional camera, as tilting the stick will only move the camera once in that direction, rather than continuously moving in a smooth motion until you've stopped tilting the stick. Once you've adjusted to the camera control, fighting a monster itself has its own share of grievances. This is because when you learn a monster's moveset, it doesn't necessarily always reward you for doing so. This is due to the insanely large hitboxes on some of the monster's moves. Some of my worst experiences with this so far have come from monsters like Plesioth and the Daimo Hermitor specifically. For example, you can feel like you know what the monster is going to do, get out of the way, and then somehow get hit by an invisible force 10 feet away from the move. I really don't like this, and I feel like it's due to clunky mechanics rather than my own abilities, but at the same time, it does bring even more tension to what were already tough battles. Because of this, you have to take extreme caution when fighting monsters. If you're even slightly too aggressive, you're gonna end up wasted. Like this. Or this. And I'm not sure if it's just me, but your health seems to be depleted much quicker in this game when compared to newer entries, and the same goes for stamina. I'm sure there's countless other examples I have to look forward to, and honestly I'm kind of dreading having to deal with Naga Cougar and Tigrex without my adept style backing me from generations. But it all adds to the challenge you have to overcome as a hunter. How you do that is up to you, and that's what I love about these games. With that being said, there are less options available when it comes to the fight itself. In this game, there is no monster mounting, environmental hazards, clutch claw, hunting arts, or anything like that. It's just you versus the monster. You have to beat it with your own knowledge and skill alone. There's not really any abusive mechanics to speak of. Upon writing up this review of the game, I came to realise that the way I was describing the game didn't really seem to sell it. At least not to a wide audience. But don't get me wrong, I love the game and I'll continue to play it in anticipation for the upcoming Monster Hunter Rise. What I love specifically is how immersed I feel as a hunter in this game. I honestly feel like all the extra time I put into the game is so much more rewarding through the trial and error nature of the game. Like, I learned that, like, I wasn't just handed the answer from the beginning, and I really like that. However, I do recognize this isn't for everyone. Like any Monster Hunter game, there is a huge time commitment involved, and with this game, it is made even more so with its steep learning curve. I would say, if you're a fan of the Monster Hunter games and are interested in learning about where the game came from and its history, then definitely check it out. It's still Monster Hunter at the end of the day, it's just a stripped down version of what you may be used to. On the other hand, if this is going to be your first experience with Monster Hunter, I can't say I would recommend you start with this one. I love it, and it's a fantastic game, but it's not friendly to newcomers. There's not even an app to lean on like with Generations, World, and 4 Ultimate, which is something Monster Hunter still needs to work on, I believe. It is such a shame that a game series this good is so daunting to new players. But if you give it a try, it just might become one of your favourite game series of all time. It's really that good. Just maybe start with one of the newer entries. Well, that was my review and impressions of Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. While a great game, it's certainly aged, and it isn't the best for newcomers, but die-hard fans will still get enjoyment out of it. If you liked the video, make sure to give it a like, leave a comment below, and subscribe to catch my next video. If you're a veteran of Monster Hunter, show that hunter spirit and make sure to leave your thoughts about this game down below, and perhaps even leave some tips. I'm sure many would appreciate it. If you've never seen this game before, do you think you'll give it a try? Or will you give it a hard pass? Let me know, I'm curious. For my next video, I'll be reviewing Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. I'm still yet to play the game, like, properly, so I may need a little bit more time than usual to get a proper feel for the game before expressing my thoughts on it. Also, if you enjoy these videos I put out, I have links to all my other socials down below, like Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, so follow me on all those places if you want some more, and you want to know what's up and coming. Anyway, I've been King Rob Rule, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya!